Okay everyone, I'm coming back to you today to have a talk about my top 10 NES games. Now, if you know, my thing is to try to put focus on things that are unique to the NES and weren't redone later, what I call a pure NES experience. That is something that is unique to a place and time, something you can't get back, unless you play it again. And I have put them into a top 10 list. And some of these are going to be pretty predictable, but others not. The first one on the list is going to be DuckTales. The original DuckTales. Now, with re-releases and things being what they are, it is a lot easier to get a hold of DuckTales 2. Which kind of feels like downloaded content for DuckTales. A lot of things are reused and remixed. So I do want to give a shout out for DuckTales 2. But the fact of the matter is, back in the day, more people had DuckTales 2 for Game Boy than they did for the NES, because it was extremely rare and hard to find. And quite frankly, most of us were still playing the original DuckTales, because it has incredible replay value. There's always more secrets, always ways you could do things in a different order or do it faster, or you could just like sit there and listen to the soundtrack, because the soundtrack is amazing. I swear, back in 2006 when YouTube first started, one of the first videos I favorited was just garage bands playing the Moon theme. I had like a list of that back in 2006. Thank God for YouTube so I could have that wonderful experience. It's actually, my wife is more of a fan of this than I am, but Fester's Quest. Now, Fester's Quest is a licensed game. It licensed the character Fester from the Addams Family. I was not a huge fan of the Addams Family growing up. I'm gonna be honest, I was Team Munsters. All my friends were Team Addams Family. So, I still feel that my side is ultimately the winner. But the Addams Family does have a lot of merits to it as a franchise. Fester's Quest is not a good Addams Family game. Does not represent Addams Family-ness. For that, I would just read the Addams Family on the Super Nintendo, which I think pretty much nails what a Addams Family game should be to a T. But what Fester's Quest is, it's Blaster Master on hard mode. It's like a serious hardcore Blaster Master. Which I know is odd to hear, because they did years later come out with a hardcore Blaster Master that you can play on your PC at any time, which is great. But the thing is, Fester's Quest version, you have Fester instead of Spaceman Dude. It's extremely difficult. You're going to need a step-by-step guide to get through it. There are power-ups that actually make you worse, so you actually have to manage your power, which is it's a lot like exactly what you did in Blaster Master. You know, you were managing your power in the sense that you didn't want to lose it. But now you're adding an extra step. There's an extra thing you have to do. You have to make sure you don't lose your power, but you also can't have too much power, because the direction of your blaster changes. It's a good point. Who gave Fester a gun? Who thought that was a good idea? Once again, no spoilers, but just take all festies out of your brain and just think of it as a pure Blaster Master experience, and then you could go back and see it in a totally different light. And yeah, it's one of those things that it's hard just to give you something hard to do. It's hard to give you a huge challenge to surmount. But after you surmounted it, it feels so amazing. Third on my list is Mario 3, funnily enough. This is on the list because you have to play Mario 3. Now, in my personal opinion, Mario 4, that is to say Super Mario World, is exactly like Mario 3, but it does everything a little bit better. And it looks a little nicer, etc., etc. But you have to play Mario 3, because it's Mario 3. Fred Savage made an entire movie about how you need to play Super Mario Bros. 3. You know, you can go ahead and rush through it with the warp whistles, just to say you could have done it, or you could just sit there and kind of experience every stage. Every stage has a story in this game. Stop me before I go too far. It pushes the Mario franchise as far as it had ever been at the time, and it pushes the hardware of the NES as far as it could possibly go. And for that reason, I really think you should check it out. So here's another one that's kind of on the list for sentimental reasons, and that's Balloon Fight. Okay? Balloon Fight, let's be honest with ourselves here. This is kind of a rip-off of Joust. So I don't like Joust, like at all. I didn't like it when it showed up in Ready Player One, the book. I didn't like it was in arcades, and I don't like it today. So why do I like Balloon Fight? It's a lot more approachable, okay? It's the Joust, but the sprites are bigger. It's more forgiving. The gameplay is more dynamic. Yeah, it's very arcadey. It's a bunch of single-cell levels, one after another. There's something to be said for that. It's a real challenge to see how far you can get. And it has an endless mode, the Balloon Flight, okay? Now that was so good that it was remade for Nintendo Land, and that was a real high point of it. I really enjoyed it. And the music, absolutely amazing. The Legend of Zelda. The Legend of Zelda is The Legend of Zelda. And this is a game that I play casually. What does that mean? Casually means you go back and you play the first quest, just the first quest, okay? You know, as a kid, it was frustrating to me because the first quest of Zelda and the second quest of Zelda seemed like exactly the same thing, you know? Now that I'm older and I have a little bit more of salt and pepper in my hair, there's a bit more of the road behind me, I now really understand what the differences are. You can get through the first quest without a map, without anything special, without getting a bunch of paper and crayons and working things out. You know, you can just kind of get through it. And that's including Death Mountain. Okay, you might need to draw yourself a map to get through Death Mountain. But even so, it's doable. You can do it, okay? Zelda Quest 1 is a casual game for me. Zelda Quest 2, that's a hardcore game. You need to have all your ducks in a row. You need to grind and grind, okay? You need to find and find, okay? Every secret counts, you need every heart container, and, okay, yeah, there are people who speedrun that, okay? But I'm playing it just for the joy of playing it, okay? Because it's Zelda. Now before I go, Zelda 2 is good, but it's one of those games that's difficult just to get you to surmount it, okay? And yeah, I do recommend completing it once in your career as an experience, but I did that when it was re-released on the Nintendo 3DS, and I haven't gone back to it since, so that should tell you something. Castlevania, the first Castlevania. Castlevania 2, that's probably my favorite because I love leveling up in it, and it is very frustrating and difficult to complete, but I enjoy it as a Metroidvania experience, okay? And I love Castlevania 3 because there's so much you can do. You can be different characters, you can take different paths, okay? It's a very in-your-face popcorn entertainment kind of game, despite its difficulty. Now, the original Castlevania, it's a challenge. It's 6 stages, just the 6. You gotta beat them in that order, and they're all incredibly difficult, okay? So, it's a marathon. It's a gamut. You have to just go through it and just hit yourself as hard as you can until you get through it. And, completing 1/6 of Castlevania is a lot more satisfying than completely completing most other games on the NES. And to get all 6 in a row, it's such a feeling of accomplishment. And amazing music, and all your favorite Universal monsters appear. It's a win-win. So, a great overall experience. This is despite the fact that the same story was since redone for Castlevania 4 on the Super Nintendo, which is probably my favorite game of all time. So, to go back and play a less graphical, more difficult, more frustrating version of my favorite game and still like it, I think that's a glowing endorsement. Oh hey, while I got you here, can you subscribe to the channel? It would really make a difference. Thanks a lot. Hey, all right. So the next one is Crystalis. Okay, now this is an action RPG, a lot like Zelda. But in a lot of ways, it's better. The action is more fun, it's smooth, everything is bright and colorful. Getting around is easy. Are you gonna get stuck? Yeah, there'll be some times when you get stuck because exactly what you have to do is a little bit obtuse, but with the resources of today, you can get through it and just enjoy the goodness of what Crystalis is. What I like about Crystalis is that it's made by SNK, which are the fighty, Fatal Fury punchy people. Metal Slug, Bust a Move. So the graphics are great, the music is great, it's a lot of fun to play. You're not going to get stuck too often, you're not going to have to ground too often, and if you want, there's a lot of fun secrets to play. And it's kind of a fun story. It's, in 1997, October 10th, I guess, the world ends due to the bomb going off, and then it's 100 years in the future, and the reason why there's monsters everywhere is because of radiation, etc. It's one of those... There was a lot of these in the 80s. This was made in 1990. It must be really depressing to make a game in 1990 and say that everyone will die in 7 years. That's it's kind of rough. There is a version of this for the Game Boy Color, but I really have a great affection for what's on the NES. So I'd like everyone to try it, because the fact is it got glazed over because of the lateness of arrival, but it's definitely worth trying. Okay, the next one is Dragon Spirit. Oh my word. Now, I have previously discussed Contra, and I put Contra on my list of recommendations because it faithfully put on the NES just the experience that was in the arcade, which was a very difficult thing to do. I am putting this on the list for the opposite reason. Okay, and full disclosure, this is like my favorite NES game. So I'm trying to be cool. I'm trying to be level-headed about this. So I'm going to take a very measured approach to talking about it, but it is amazing. It's essentially it's a two-direction shooter. It's set up like Xevious. One button fires down onto the ground below you, and one fires straight ahead, like 1942. And so you're dealing with things coming at you from below you and in front of you, and of course, all around you. So it's a lot to keep track of. And it's a lot to keep track of. The arcade game, which is also awesome, is obscenely difficult. There's an arcade game where when you put in your quarter, you have a level select up to level 4, because they know how hard they made the game. They know how impossible it was just to get to level 4 even once. So they give you a little bit of a leg up because it's that difficult. Now, the thing about the NES game is it has bright enemy girl characters that you rescue at the Everett level, has more story, and it has an adjustable difficulty scale. If you bomb the introductory stage, by purpose or otherwise, you play on easy mode. But if you nail it, you play on normal mode, or Blue Dragon mode, as we call it. And I think that is really weird and innovative. It's kind of like the adaptive difficulty that would come later in the PlayStation era. But it's more in your face about it. Less duplicitous, which is what I really like. And just going through it as an NES shooter, this would be my favorite of that particular instance. Definitely. So everyone, if you missed on it, you gotta try Dragon Spirit. Okay, now the next one is Wario's Woods. This, along with Zoda's Revenge, are famous for being the last games ever officially produced by Nintendo for the Nintendo Entertainment System. This was way after they actually released the Super Nintendo in both Japan and Western markets, but they still kept it going. And this is on my list for two reasons. One, I actually have a world record in it. Okay, so that's something. And two, it kind of symbolizes how Nintendo was still dedicated to the Nintendo Entertainment System fans. They didn't just throw them under the bus once a new system was on the shelves of Toys R Us. Okay, they kept by you and stood by you. Okay, and you know that was then. This is now. I don't know. It's a lot of years have gone on the dusty road since then. But one thing I can say for certain, that in the moment, it meant a lot to me. As a kid who was spending all of his allowance on Nintendo and Super Nintendo carts, okay, it meant something. Because I was there when the Sega Master System disappeared overnight, literally, when the Genesis became a thing. And, you know, knowing the reality of the industry, I can't blame them now. But back in the day, my allowance saving child self was really put out by that. How my precious Master System just disappeared to make room for the new thing. But Nintendo, they did their best to make sure they were taken care of. And yeah, it's a good game. It fills in. It's like, have you ever been playing like Columns or Tetris, and you just you accidentally put like this one piece over here? It's like, you just want to stop everything and just want to take some tweezers and go in there and grab it and move it one space over to the left. You know, that insane feeling of like, just move it over a tiny bit. Okay, that's who this game is for. This is a game where you actually can crawl around in between all of the columns and blocks or whatever and move them over slightly. That's the entire crux of the game. And you know, it's disorientating at first, but then you get used to it, and all of a sudden you can be like a wizard. You can just like go through it so fast. All right, well anyway, that's all I have to say about Wario's Woods. You guys have a great day. All right, so here it is. Gyromite. The original R.O.B the robot game. All right, so there was only one other robot game, which was Stack Up. And I have in my collecting career played Stack Up with the robot and without the robot. I've had it in my collection. I've since let it go. So yeah, it's just that Towers game, but with the robot. But if you already own the robot, Stack Up was notorious for being ridiculously hard to find and ridiculously expensive. I'm talking about Gyromite, the one that you definitely got if you had the robot at all. All right? And here's the thing. There is a very, very good two-player co-op game hidden within Gyromite. The robot itself isn't fast enough to actually play the game with you once you get past a certain level, like level 24, I think. It just can't happen. You know, they're timed levels, and the robot goes up and down very slowly and has to charge up a gyro to get it to stand up in place. I mean, seriously. It's a nice parlor trick. It's nice to bring it out at parties, okay? But if you're actually going to play Gyromite, R.O.B is not going to be able to raise and lower the blue and red pillars enough for you to complete these platforming puzzle levels. But if you have a friend who's there to hang out and solve puzzles with you, he can hit the A and B buttons on controller 2 for you, and you can solve the puzzles together. And feel free to switch off every level. When I was a kid, I had the whole setup for the robot. So I would take my foot, instead of putting gyros on the two platforms, I would just use them as pedals, okay? So I'd be controlling the character with my hands, and I would control the blue and red pillars with my feet. And I got all the way through the game. It was an amazing puzzle platforming experience. And the fact of it is, most people don't even know that this NES game exists. I mean, they know that it exists, but they know it exists as something you can only do with a robot, okay? Which is not really the case. With just a slight modification, this is a great two-player puzzle platformer, all right? So I recommend you go back and check it out. There is a way to set up a modern controller so that you can, so if you want to figure out how to do that, go ahead and contact me. I'll tell you the secret. But yes, you can get everything onto one controller and toggle the two pillars with your trigger fingers and play the NES function with your thumbs. And I've done it recently, and it's actually a really fun time. I recommend everyone go out and do it. All right, so there you go. I hope this list meant something. You know, there's a lot of chatter about the old NES games, but I feel like I have something to add. And I feel like going back and playing these specific games for these specific reasons can really add to your retro gaming experience. And so, until next time, I want everyone out there, take care of yourselves, and a little play goes a long way.